Love stories about cheating husbands and marriage betrayals? You're in the right place. Hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story. I still remember the exact moment my life split in two. It was a Tuesday in March, the kind of cold, gray Tuesday that makes you want to stay in bed. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Claire Donovan? The voice was flat. Official. Yes, that's me. This is Officer Brett Hale with the Nashville Police Department. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. I put my pen down. There's been an accident on Route 40. A vehicle matching your husband's car went off the bridge near mile marker 12. We found the car submerged. There was no survivor. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, holding the phone, staring at the red pen in my hand, and felt the world go completely silent. They said the body had been swept downstream. They said recovery could take days. They said they were sorry. I called Marcus's cell phone 4 times after that, straight to voicemail. His voice, warm, familiar, saying, "Hey, you've reached Marcus. Leave a message." I left no message. The next 72 hours were a blur of police reports, phone calls to his office, and neighbors bringing casseroles I never touched. His company expressed condolences. His mother flew in from Atlanta. Everyone cried. I moved through it all like I was made of glass, transparent, fragile, one wrong touch away from shattering. 2 weeks later, the insurance company processed the claim without much resistance. $380,000 deposited directly into my account. I remember staring at that number on my laptop screen and thinking, something is wrong. Marcus had taken out that policy 14 months ago, quietly, without telling me. I only found out by accident, going through his files looking for our tax documents. At the time, he said it was just responsible planning. I believed him. I always believed him. But standing in our bedroom that night, his side of the closet half empty, his watch missing from the nightstand, his laptop gone, I started counting the things that didn't add up. No body, no final text, no goodbye. And a husband who, I was only beginning to realize, had been lying to me for much longer than I ever imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, in our bed, and I made a decision. I would not fall apart. I would find the truth. And if Marcus Donovan was still breathing somewhere, I would make sure he regretted every single choice that led him there. 3 weeks after the funeral, if you can even call it that, since there was no body to bury, I was sitting at my desk paying bills when my laptop made a sound I hadn't heard in a while. A calendar notification. Marcus, storage unit renewal, April 15th, Unit 1 of 14, Riverside Self-Storage. I stared at it for a long moment. Marcus had never mentioned a storage unit. I went the next morning, told the front desk I was his widow, showed my marriage certificate, and after 20 minutes of paperwork, they handed me the key. Unit 114 was small, maybe 10 by 12. Inside, 2 boxes, a black duffel bag, and a prepaid laptop still in its packaging. The boxes held nothing unusual at first glance. Old files, a few books, but at the bottom of the second box, underneath a layer of newspapers, I found a manila envelope. Inside were printed emails, between Marcus and a woman named Diana Reeves. The earliest one was dated 19 months ago. I read every single one standing in that cold storage unit, the metal door half open behind me, January wind cutting through my coat like a blade. They weren't love letters, not exactly. They were logistics, timelines, account numbers, wire transfers to a bank in the Cayman Islands, a new address in Medellin, Colombia, 2 plane tickets purchased under different names, and one email, sent just 4 days before the accident, where Marcus wrote, "After the claim clears, we disappear. Claire will be fine. She's strong. She'll move on." I read that line 3 times. She's strong. She'll move on. He had planned this down to the last detail. The accident, the missing body, the insurance payout, a clean exit from his entire life, from me, wrapped in a tragedy that everyone would accept without question. I sat down on the concrete floor of that storage unit and stayed there for a long time. I didn't cry. I thought. By the time I walked back to my car, I had made 3 decisions. First, I would not go to the police. Not yet. The moment this became an official investigation, I would lose control of everything, and I needed control. Second, I would find Diana Reeves. Third, I would let Marcus believe, for just a little while longer, that his plan had worked perfectly. Because the worst thing I could do to a man who faked his death to escape his life was to let him feel safe, and then take everything. Diana Reeves wasn't hard to find. That was the first thing that surprised me. For a woman who had helped a man fake his own death, she had been remarkably careless about her digital footprint. LinkedIn, Instagram, a Facebook profile she hadn't fully deactivated. I found her in less than 40 minutes sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I finished reading. Diana Reeves, 34, originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, financial analyst at the same consulting firm where Marcus had worked for 6 years. She had resigned, quietly, with 2 weeks' notice, exactly 11 days before the accident. Her Instagram was still public. The last post was from 8 months ago, a photo at a rooftop bar downtown Nashville. She was laughing at something off camera, one hand wrapped around a glass of wine, dark hair pulled back, beautiful in a very deliberate way, the kind of beautiful that takes effort and knows it. I zoomed in on the background, and there, partially cropped at the edge of the frame, was a hand resting on her shoulder, a man's hand. I recognized the watch immediately, a silver Breitling with a scratched clasp. I had given it to Marcus on our 10th anniversary. I set my phone down on the table very carefully. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and started writing down everything I knew: dates, amounts, names, email contents, every detail from those printed pages in the storage unit. I worked for 2 hours without stopping, building a timeline so precise that even a defense attorney couldn't find holes in it. When I finished, I leaned back and looked at what I had: a husband who had stolen my future, a woman who had helped him do it, and $380,000 sitting in my bank account that they were almost certainly expecting to recover somehow. Once enough time had passed, and they felt safe enough to reach out, because that was the part of their plan I kept coming back to: the money. Marcus knew me. He knew I wasn't greedy. He probably assumed I would keep enough to stabilize myself and leave the rest untouched, grieving and obedient, exactly the way he had scripted me. What he didn't count on was that grief, and I had made a different agreement. I wasn't grieving. I was preparing. I called a private investigator the next morning, a woman named Sandra Cho, ex-law enforcement, highly recommended by a colleague, completely discreet. I told her only what she needed to know. I had reason to believe my husband was alive. I gave her Diana's name, her last known location, and the Medellin address from the emails. Sandra asked me one question before she took the case. "When you find him, what do you want to do?" I didn't hesitate. "I want proof," I said. "Enough to give me every option." She told me to expect results within 3 weeks. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the silence of my house. His house. Our house. And for the first time since that phone call in March, I felt something that wasn't pain. It felt like power. Sandra called me on a Wednesday afternoon, 17 days after I hired her. I was in the middle of a parent-teacher conference when my phone buzzed. I excused myself, stepped into the hallway, and answered on the 3rd ring. "I found him," she said. No introduction, no softening, just those 3 words, clean and direct. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes for exactly 2 seconds. "Where?" "Medellin," just like the address in those emails. "He's living in El Poblado. Nice neighborhood, upscale apartment, 14th floor with a city view. Goes by the name Michael Reed now. Has a local bank account, a gym membership, and a reservation at the same restaurant every Friday night." She paused. "With Diana." I said nothing. "Claire?" Sandra's voice was careful. "I have photos, video, time-stamped, geotagged, everything you'd need. Before I send anything, I want to make sure you're ready to see this. Send it." The file arrived 4 minutes later. I waited until I got home to open it. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had taken that phone call in March, the same chair, the same cold gray light coming through the window, and I opened Sandra's folder. 47 photos, 2 videos. Marcus, my husband, the man I had built 17 years of my life with, walking through a sunlit street in Medellin in a linen shirt I had never seen before, laughing, tanned, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Diana beside him, her hand in his, both of them looking like people who had absolutely nothing to hide and everything to enjoy. There was one photo that hit differently than the others. They were sitting at an outdoor cafe, morning light, 2 coffees on the table. Marcus was looking at his phone, and Diana had her head resting on his shoulder, eyes closed, completely at ease. He looked content, not guilty, not haunted, not like a man who had destroyed someone's life to get there. Just content. I stared at that photo for a long time, and something inside me shifted, not broke, shifted, like a gear catching, locking into place with a quiet, permanent click. Because I realized in that moment that the cruelest part of what Marcus had done wasn't the lie. It wasn't the money, or the fake death, or even Diana. It was how easy it had apparently been for him to leave. 17 years, and he was having morning coffee in Colombia looking like a man on vacation. I closed the folder. I called Sandra back. "I need 2 more things," I said. "His current account information, whatever you can find, and the name of a good international attorney." "What kind of attorney?" "The kind who knows exactly what fraud, insurance deception, and faking your death across state lines actually means in terms of federal charges." Sandra was quiet for a moment. "You're not going to confront him directly?" "No," I said. "I'm going to be much more patient than that." I heard something in her voice that might have been respect. "I'll have both for you by Friday," she said. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to the kitchen, made myself dinner for the first time in weeks, and ate every bite. Marcus was happy in Medellin. That was fine. Happiness, I had learned, could be a very temporary condition. The attorney Sandra recommended was named Robert Caldwell. 62 years old, former federal prosecutor, an office in downtown Nashville that smelled like old books and quiet confidence. I laid everything on his desk in a single folder: the emails, Sandra's photos, the timestamps, the insurance documents, the wire transfers to the Cayman account. He read through it without a word, turning pages slowly, his face completely neutral. When he finished, he closed the folder and looked at me over his glasses. "Mrs. Donovan, what your husband did constitutes federal insurance fraud, wire fraud, and willful identity deception across international lines. The FBI has jurisdiction. If we hand this to the right people, Marcus Donovan will be extradited and prosecuted. You would likely keep the insurance settlement as a victim of fraud, and he would face serious federal time." "How serious?" 15 to 20 years. Possibly more, depending on the wire fraud charges. I nodded slowly. "But," Caldwell continued, watching me carefully, "I get the sense that's not the only thing you want." "No," I said. "It's not." I had spent the previous 4 nights building a second plan, one that ran parallel to the legal case like a shadow, because sending Marcus to prison felt necessary. But it didn't feel complete. He had taken 17 years from me. He had taken my sense of reality. He had sat across from me at dinner tables and anniversary dinners and quiet Sunday mornings, looked me in the eyes, and performed the role of husband while planning his escape down to the last wire transfer. Prison was justice. What I wanted was for him to lose everything he had run toward, not just everything he had left behind. I explained what I needed from Caldwell. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's going to require very precise timing." "I know, and patience." "I have nothing but time," I said. We shook hands. Over the next 3 weeks, Caldwell began building the federal case quietly, working with a contact at the FBI field office in Nashville. Sandra continued monitoring Marcus and Diana in Medellin, sending me weekly updates. Routine, comfortable, unsuspecting. Meanwhile, I handled the second part myself. Diana, I had discovered through further research, had left behind significant financial loose ends in Nashville. A joint investment account she shared with a former business partner, still active, still in her name, and a condo she owned that had never been officially sold, just quietly abandoned. I hired a real estate attorney to place a legal hold on the condo based on outstanding HOA fees Diana had stopped paying. Then I contacted her former business partner, a man named Greg Tolson, who, according to public court records, had been trying to recover his portion of that investment account for over a year. I sent Greg an anonymous email with Diana's current location. Just her location. Nothing else. I didn't need to do more than that. Some traps don't require elaborate mechanisms. Sometimes you just need to pull one thread and wait for the whole thing to unravel on its own. Greg Tolson moved faster than I expected. Within a week of receiving my anonymous tip, he had hired his own attorney and filed an emergency motion to freeze Diana's accessible assets, including the joint investment account she had apparently been planning to drain quietly from Colombia. Sandra called me on a Thursday morning, barely containing something that sounded almost like amusement. "There's movement in Medellin," she said. "Diana received some kind of legal notification 2 days ago. Since then, 3 phone calls to a Nashville number, what looks like a heated argument with Marcus at the apartment, and she spent 4 hours at a local legal office yesterday afternoon." I poured my coffee slowly. "How does Marcus look?" "Tense," Sandra said. "Very tense. He's been making calls, too. Different numbers. One of them traces back to a bank in the Cayman Islands. There it was, the first crack in their perfect life. I had suspected that Marcus and Diana's arrangement in Medellin depended on a careful, undisturbed flow of money. The Cayman account was their safety net, the insurance payout, plus whatever Marcus had skimmed from client accounts over the previous 2 years, something Caldwell's FBI contact was now quietly investigating. Any disruption to that flow would create pressure. Pressure would create conflict. And conflict between two people who had built their relationship on betrayal and financial conspiracy was, I knew, an extremely fragile thing. I thought about that photo, Diana's head on Marcus's shoulder, morning coffee, the ease of it. I wondered how easy it felt now. I met with Caldwell that Friday. The FBI is ready to move, he told me. They have enough for the warrant. They can request extradition from Colombia within the next 30 days. Not yet, I said. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. Give it 2 more weeks, I said. I want the Cayman account frozen first. I want him to watch the money disappear before he understands why. Caldwell studied me for a moment. You've thought about this very carefully. He had 19 months to plan his exit, I said. I've had 3 weeks. I think that's enough. The Cayman account freeze came through on a Tuesday, a result of the wire fraud investigation running parallel to the extradition case. The moment it was flagged, all transfers were suspended pending federal review. Sandra confirmed the fallout within 48 hours. Marcus and Diana had left the upscale apartment in El Poblado. They were now in a cheaper rental on the other side of the city. Diana had attempted to access the frozen investment account twice in one day. Marcus had stopped going to the gym, stopped the Friday restaurant reservations. The linen shirt and morning coffee life was over, and they still had no idea what was coming next. I almost missed it. It came through an email address I hadn't used in years, an old account from before Marcus and I were married, one I had forgotten I still had access to. He must have kept it somewhere, buried in old files, for exactly this kind of moment. An emergency contact that couldn't be easily traced back to him. The subject line was blank. The message was 4 sentences. I know this is a shock. I need you to understand that I never wanted to hurt you. Things became complicated in ways I can't fully explain in an email. Please don't do anything until we can talk. No name, no apology, no acknowledgement of what he had actually done. I read it 3 times. Then I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I wrote back. Not immediately. I waited 2 days, letting him sit in the silence, letting the anxiety build. Then I typed a single line and hit send before I could reconsider. I'm listening. His response came within minutes, which told me everything about how desperate he had become. He wanted to talk by phone. A video call. Just the 2 of us. He said he could explain everything. He said there were things I didn't understand about the pressure he had been under, about the financial situation at work, about how the plan had never been meant to hurt me personally. I agreed to the call. I set it up for the following evening and spent the next 24 hours preparing. I told Caldwell. I told Sandra. I set up a recording application on my laptop, legal in Tennessee for single-party calls, and I tested it twice to make sure it worked. When Marcus's face appeared on my screen, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not rage, not grief, not even satisfaction. Just a profound, clarifying calm. He looked older, tired. The tan was still there, but the ease was completely gone. He looked like a man standing on ice he could hear cracking beneath him. Claire. His voice was careful, rehearsed. Marcus, I said. He talked for 11 minutes. I counted. He explained the debt. Real debt, apparently, from bad investments he had hidden from me for years. He explained the pressure from his firm. He explained Diana as something that had happened gradually, unplanned, which was almost certainly a lie, but I let it go. He explained the insurance scheme as the only exit he could see at the time, a temporary solution, money he had always intended to eventually repay. He used the word repay with a completely straight face. When he finally stopped talking, there was a long silence. What do you want, Marcus? I asked. He swallowed. I want to know that you're not going to go to the authorities, that we can handle this privately. The money, I'll find a way to make it right. He stopped. Just give me a chance to fix this. I looked at him for a moment. I'll think about it, I said. And I ended the call. The recording was clean. Caldwell had it within the hour. It was, he told me, the single most useful piece of evidence in the entire case. Marcus had just confessed to everything. The FBI made contact with Colombian authorities on a Monday morning. I know this because Caldwell called me at 7:14 a.m. to let me know the extradition request had been formally submitted. Colombian federal police would locate and detain Marcus Donovan, currently living under the name Michael Reed, within 72 hours pending confirmation of identity. I thanked him, hung up, and sat with it for a moment. Then I got dressed, drove to school, and taught 3 classes, because that was the thing Marcus had never understood about me. I didn't fall apart. I didn't stop functioning. When everything collapsed, I got up and I moved, quietly, carefully, one step at a time, until I had rebuilt enough ground to stand on. He had mistaken steadiness for weakness. That had been his most expensive mistake. Sandra called at 2:30 that afternoon. "They found him," she said. Marcus had been at a grocery store 2 blocks from the new rental when Colombian federal agents approached him. Sandra had a contact in the local press who had been tipped off, discreetly, professionally, and there were photographs. Marcus Donovan, hands zip-tied behind his back, standing in the produce section of a Medellin supermarket, still holding a bag of coffee he hadn't yet paid for. His expression in the photo was the one I had been waiting to see for months. Not anger, not defiance. Pure, undiluted shock. The shock of a man who had believed, completely and comfortably, that he had gotten away with it. Diana had been detained separately at the rental apartment. She had apparently tried to leave through a back stairwell with a laptop bag, and was stopped on the second-floor landing. Her frozen assets in Nashville were formally seized the same afternoon. I drove home after school, changed into comfortable clothes, and made dinner. I ate at the kitchen table, the same chair, and outside the window, Nashville was doing what Nashville does in late spring, blooming, green, and unhurried, completely indifferent to the precise collapse of one man's carefully constructed escape. My phone buzzed once, an unknown international number. I looked at it, let it ring, let it go to voicemail. I never listened to the message. There was nothing Marcus Donovan could say to me from a detention cell in Medellin that I needed to hear. I already had everything I needed. The extradition process took 4 months. I won't pretend those 4 months were easy. There were depositions and federal interviews, and a level of public exposure I hadn't anticipated. Local news picked up the story, then a national outlet, and for approximately 3 weeks, I was the woman whose husband faked his death on every morning show in America. I gave 1 interview. 1. A reporter from a Nashville paper I had read for years, a woman who had the decency to ask real questions instead of performing sympathy for the camera. I told her what I wanted people to know, and nothing more. The rest I kept. Marcus arrived back in Nashville on a Tuesday in September, escorted by federal marshals, and was arraigned the following morning. Diana was extradited 2 weeks later on separate charges including wire fraud and conspiracy. I attended Marcus's arraignment. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched them bring him in. He had lost weight. The tan was completely gone. He was wearing a gray detention outfit that made him look like a stranger, which, I had come to understand, he largely was. He saw me. I don't know what he expected. Tears, maybe, or anger. Some visible proof that destroying my life had left a mark significant enough to satisfy whatever part of him still needed to matter to me. I held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then, I looked away. Not dramatically, not with performance. I simply looked away, the way you look away from something that no longer requires your attention. His attorney entered a not guilty plea. Caldwell told me afterward that given the recorded confession and the documentary evidence, a trial was unlikely. A plea deal was the more probable outcome, which meant Marcus would likely serve between 8 and 12 years, with Diana receiving a lighter sentence in exchange for cooperation. 8 to 12 years. I thought about that number on the drive home. 17 years of marriage. 17 years of shared mornings and dinners and ordinary Tuesdays, and the specific, irreplaceable texture of a life built with another person. 8 to 12 years seemed almost abstract by comparison. But here is what I had learned in the months since that phone call in March. The thing nobody tells you about betrayal at this scale. The grief and the rage and the disorientation eventually settle. Not disappear, settle. They find their place in you and stop taking up so much space. And in the space they leave behind, if you're careful and honest and willing to sit with the discomfort long enough, something else grows. I wasn't sure yet what to call it, but it felt like mine. It's been 14 months since Marcus was arraigned. He accepted a plea deal in January. 9 years, federal facility, eligible for parole review after 6. Diana received 3 years and cooperated fully, as expected. The Cayman account, once unfrozen and fully audited, contained just over $400,000. most of it recovered and allocated between federal restitution and civil damages awarded to me and 2 former clients Marcus had defrauded. I kept the house. I didn't keep it out of sentimentality. I kept it because it was mine too. 17 years of my salary, my maintenance, my care embedded in every room, and I refused to let Marcus's choices take it from me along with everything else. But I changed things. I repainted the living room a color Marcus would have hated, a deep, warm terracotta that catches the late afternoon light in a way that still surprises me sometimes when I come home. I replaced the kitchen table, not because the old one was damaged, but because I was done sitting in that chair in that exact spot waiting for the next terrible phone call. The new table is smaller, fits 2 comfortably, 4 if needed. I started running in the mornings, not for any particular reason. I just needed somewhere to put the energy that used to go into managing a marriage that was, I now understood, largely fictional. I went back to school part-time, education administration, something I had talked about for years, while Marcus quietly redirected the conversation toward his own career, his own plans, his own carefully constructed future that apparently never included a version of me that grew. I have a long way to go. That's fine. I'm not in a hurry. There is one thing I want to say to anyone who has ever been told, implicitly or explicitly, by someone who claimed to love them, that they were the stable one, the reliable one, the one who would be fine. Marcus wrote that in an email to Diana 19 months before his fake death. Claire will be fine. She's strong. She'll move on. He meant it as reassurance, permission, a way of closing the door on me neatly so he could walk away without guilt. But here's what he didn't understand. What people like Marcus never understand about people like me. He was right. I am strong. I did move on. He just made the catastrophic mistake of assuming that those qualities would work in his favor. They didn't. They worked entirely in mine. I close my laptop on Tuesday evenings now and sit on the back porch with a glass of wine, watching the Nashville sky do what it does in early summer, turning slow colors, unhurried, indifferent to anything as small as one man's plan. And I think about the version of me that answered that phone call in March, the woman sitting at the kitchen table with a red pen, completely unaware that her life was about to split in 2. I wish I could tell her something useful. I think what I'd say is this. The split is not the end of the story. It's just the place where your real one begins. Thanks for sticking with us until the very end. Your support means everything. Smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama. Catch you in the next one.